Welcome back to another very special episode of NBL Now. It might be the off-season, but big news broke yesterday with the Brisbane Bullets announcing their brand new head coach, launching this franchise into the future. And it's someone that everybody has heard of, everybody knows well enough, or perhaps we're about to learn a bit more about him in Stu Lash. Stu, thank you for joining me. I know we've chatted a lot in the last couple of years around the Bullets, around the NBL. So this is a little different. Now we're doing it differently, but congratulations on the role. And how you feeling?
Thank you. Good to be with you, Pete. I feel great, like ready to go. I was joking around with some of the guys yesterday. I wish we start tomorrow.
It's interesting because, again, a free agency officially opens in the NBL today as we're recording this. So you have to hit the ground running, signing players, bringing together a championship contending roster. But just a little bit, I guess, about how this came about. We saw it in the media release. We know the press conference yesterday. Can you maybe sum up for the fans that haven't had a chance to watch or read that, how this decision came about for you to now be the head coach of the Bullets?
Sure. No, and, when we started the process, the first thing we did was really identify different character traits, personality traits, more about the person that we were looking for this leadership position. I was certainly part of that. And, we're out identifying all those. And, we're starting to talk to a number of different coaching candidates. And then a little unbeknownst to me, ownership reached out to Malcolm. And, as they started to dissect what those traits and personalities look like, my name was mentioned to Malcolm as like, hey, should we be looking at Stu, in this role? Malcolm called me, we had a brief chat about it. I took a couple of days to kind of digest it, talk to my family. This wasn't, Stu, do you want the job? This was, Stu, do you want to be part of this process? We think this is, a unique situation with where the organization is, the players that we have under contract, the assistants that we have in-house that we want to retain. So, I took a couple of days, went on a nice couple of Colorado hikes, clear my head and, figure if this is something I really want to get after. And through some real, deep conversations and thoughts, I really started to get excited about it. And, the competitor in me, really started to rev up. And coaching has always been something that's been in my blood. Like, even if I wasn't like in a gym on a particular day, all the different hats I've gotten to wear, over the years in my experience, it always came back like from a coach's, vantage point, how I see the game, how I would communicate with our staff. So that, as that matriculated, the juices started to rev up more and more. And, I threw my hat into it. It was not an easy process at all. I mean, certainly, really detail oriented. I thought the organization did a great job of like keeping that integrity of it and, making sure that, this was best for everybody. At the end of the day, I wanted what was best for the club. So, if it turned out not to be me, I was fully understanding and confident about that. Believed in everything that we were doing here, and we forged forward.
And that's the key, I think. And again, everything that was put in the release in the press conference about how when you became a candidate, you essentially then became on the other side of having to go through that process and understanding. Now, do you think, I don't want to say so much as an advantage, but it really is because you've been a part of the Bullets organization for the last couple of years. You've seen the steps you're trying to continue to build, the culture, everything trying to go in the direction towards not just a finals berth, but being a championship contender, everything on and off the court has helped put you in a position to better understand what the club needs to do from here.
Yeah, I think that was a really important factor for both the club and myself. That, the continuity of, like I said before, having, 5 guys under contract, a staff in place. Typically when a coach is hired, he's the first one that comes in the door. And then you got to do X, Y, and Z. Here, I'm actually the last piece coming in. And the whole infrastructure, is built around that. And just, that's what gave me a lot of confidence and comfort that, we can come in here and win now. Like, this is not a rebuild. We're not trying to tear this thing down. Yes, over the last 2 years, I've had an integral part in building, the roster and the familiarity that I had with the players and not just who they are as people, but even their games. And, I'm already up on the whiteboard, breaking everything down, with Andy and Mac. It's like, what do we want to do with Casey? What do we want to do with Ty? How can we unlock more, of Tyrell, who, I think is, arguably the best big in our league, and still only, scratching the surface of who he's going to be as a player.
Let's talk a little bit about you and that journey, because again, you spoke a little bit about it there, but you've been around the game of basketball, the game of hoops worldwide at a high level for a very long time. Can you tell us a little bit about that history and the things you learned?
Sure. No, and it's, I've been very fortunate to have those experiences. And all along the journey, from being part of an NBA coaching staff to being part of an NBA front office to being part of the player representation side, even back involved in grassroots basketball, like, at high school and junior level, I'm able to, utilize those experiences with different hats on at times. And I think from a leadership position, it's going to be really important. Things come up that, or even outside of the X's and O's box, just day to day that goes on through the grind of a season. And I'm just really confident and comfortable that, whatever's going to be thrown our way, we have the infrastructure, the staff, the culture to be able to, get in front of things and, just get after it.
It's unique, again, your history then stepping into this role, because you've seen it all. You've seen every single piece that goes into not just winning on the court, but winning off the court, building in that culture, we said, the organization. Do you think, having had a firsthand look at, one, what works for teams on professional levels and perhaps what doesn't, and understanding, okay, I've been through this, and when I had this hat on, it didn't work. And now as a head coach, we know exactly what direction we have to go with all these little pieces towards this puzzle.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And like, every situation is different, right? So, what may work for one club may not work for another, and vice versa. All I can do is just believe in who I am, be authentic, know that I have the trust and the respect, from our owners to our players to our staff, and that, everyone here is all in on the same idea and concept of what we're trying to do. And that's win. We're in this to win. That's all I dream about is, having goggles on and confetti coming down and acting like a fool, and, just that experience. I mean, you've been able to have that in your career, and that's why we come to work every day.
Tell us a little bit about what you look. We'll talk about the playing group and the pieces you want to kind of put together, because as we said, there's not really much time for you to sit back and enjoy being named the head coach. It's all systems go as free agency begins. What are you most looking forward to about the challenge of being a head coach and starting this journey?
I mean, first thing that comes to mind is like just how good the league is, and from top to bottom, I don't think there's another international basketball league that has parity like the NBL does. So as a true competitor, to be able to go up against, the Uniteds, the Sydneys, the Perths, the Illawarras, Taz, I mean, you go down the line, it's really amazing. So to be put in that position, obviously, there's a high level of gratitude that I have, for this role, and to go out and compete and, arguably the best basketball world in the league outside of the NBA, is a real challenge, but something I'm, uber excited about. And like I said, I mean, I can't wait, to get started. And, I'm sitting by the phone right here waiting, on some free agency stuff to come in. And, I wish training camp, began tonight.
It is a very important part. We've heard a lot of coaches around the league talk about the season. If you want to win a championship, it starts today. We're putting the pieces together, and we will touch on that a little bit. But in terms of being the head coach, Stu Lash, what are we going to expect from Stu Lash, the head coach? Now, again, I've talked to you the last couple of years. Obviously, you're in a different role. Are you going to be an animated coach on the sideline? What's the philosophy like?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting question, because even before this process, was opened up to me, I've been studying head coaches. I've been studying like behaviors on the sideline, how they communicate in press conferences, how they lead an organization, holistically. And I think going back to the different levels of experience I have and the exposure that I've been, I always want to be somebody that's measured, and just stay in that moment. Look, it's a hard job, right? It's a really competitive, it's a short season, it's absolute sprint. But, for me, my family is everything. Like, it starts with that. So, having my family, relocate out to Australia, in a few months, and, us diving into this process, I've always been somebody that like just tries to stay, in the moment. Am I going to be somebody that's running up and down the sidelines like a lunatic? Probably not. And I don't think I'm going to be somebody that's just going to be sitting on the bench, not standing up at all. So, it's a little bit of an ebb and flow, and, I'll find my, my coaching legs, throughout, the next couple months. And, preseason and training camp. And, look, and I mentioned this the other day. I think we have two amazing assistants in Greg Vanderjack and Darryl McDonald. They'll be instrumental in our transition to this. Those guys have been here, over the last couple of years as well, and have been ingrained in the NBL. So that infrastructure, gives our organization just a lot of confidence that, we can hit the ground running right from day one.
And how much confidence, I guess, does that give you as the head coach, having the guys of experience with the wealth of experience underneath you? Because people now are obviously going to compare to Justin Tatum, what he did when he took over the Hawks, and understood the people alongside him. And you also said there was, with being a head coach, yes, your job is to win basketball games, but it starts with a lot of everything that goes off behind the scenes. And clearly Justin Tatum has a massive hands-on approach in building the culture and the success that they had. Dean Vickerman, Melbourne United loss has been the same. Now that's on you.
Yep. Yeah, and like having those guys here on our staff, gives me great comfort. It's certainly one of the reasons I was, comfortable moving forward, with that. And, every coach has their own personality and, how they put their stamp on things. And I've, over these last 2.5 years being involved in the NBL, being able to study, these coaches and, take different intricacies from them and how we can implement that. But at the end of the day, I have to be who I am. I'm a high energy, really positive guy. I like to think outside the box. I'm not sure I'm going to try to turn everything, over, but there are some things that I've had in my mind for a little while that, can shake things up and, let a little air out of the room. And I'm really, really big just on like player empowerment. At the end of the day, they're out there playing, right? It's our job as coaches to give them all the information, prepare a game plan, be ready in special situations when we need to. But, at the end of the day, it's the guy's job to go out there and execute.
Well, that brings us probably the most important point for the fans right now. They want to hear about the free agency. What kind of pieces are you looking? You've got a great returning group. Casey Prather, an MVP candidate. Tyler Harrison, as you said, one of the most dominant big men in the league. And other little pieces, Mitch Norn, you've got that kind of foundational continuity to build over. What other pieces are out there that you're looking for? I know Matthew Dellavedova has been linked to the Bullets. He's been linked to a couple of teams. If that doesn't eventuate, what kind of pieces are you trying to put together for this championship contending puzzle?
Sure. And, one name you didn't mention was, Sam McDaniel, who is almost like an addition without a subtraction because he didn't play for us all but one game last season. So adding, an all NBL level defender into that mix, is a great thing. We have to address where we are in the backcourt. And that's, you mentioned Delly and, he's obviously a phenomenal player and a great human. And then we have decisions around the imports that we had, last season and James Bateman and Keandre Cook. We're obviously losing Josh Bannon, still to be determined on what happens, with Rocco. So, it's the backcourt and it's the front court. I think we're really solid, kind of in the middle there. That's where the focus is right now.
How much pressure do you put on one, trying to get the pieces together as soon as you can? Or is it more about, if this takes a little longer than it would in the past, it doesn't matter as long as they are the perfect fit for what we believe can be a championship contender?
Yeah, the latter for sure. I mean, you don't want to, it's like this time of year, it's, you can get really crazy and sometimes reactionary to certain things. Like we've had a plan in place, going back to even before there was a coaching change or situation, as when you're in the front office, like your job on building the roster almost starts game one of the year prior, right? You're forecasting and looking, and then you evaluate your team as the season goes and where you have holes and needs. So that's always a constant flow. But it's nice to have, a really solid core group, in place. And, we got 5 guys under contract that like we could start tomorrow night. And I feel very confident that, we're going to be a competitive team.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing what you build in this offseason. And again, where the Brisbane Bullets have been, the move last year with the venues back to the entertainment centre, continuing to build that up. And I know that this is just the first stop on the media train. Obviously, the head coach comes with a lot of different media. With the fans, the excitement around everything the Bullets have been building towards the last couple of years, what's your message to them and what are you most looking forward to about engaging with them in a new role going forward?
Sure. No, it's a great question. I have great admiration for the level of enthusiasm that Australians have for sport. It's something I've been able to, witness coming out here. attending our games, going on the road, seeing other, just both sport in general, but where the NBL is now from an entertainment perspective, it's there. And like that's what excites me more than anything. And we've had great support, from our sponsors and our members. The community is a huge part of not just the club, but even my role, getting out there, engaging with all the fans, making sure that like they understand, how hard we're working. We're putting high character guys on the floor that, they can relate to, and at the end of the day, if the attitude and effort is there from the club, everything else will take care of itself.
It's great to hear that, Stu. As we said, we're looking forward to seeing what you build. I know it's a hectic time. I know you put the phone down for free agency to jump on. So congratulations once again. Good luck with free agency, and I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more before the NBL 26 kicks off.
Appreciate it, Peter. Take care.